friends, welcome back to the show. I'm Katie, host of What's Working Now. We live in a time where people are hyper aware of their health and how to, quote, live healthy now more than ever. And we listen to podcasts, we read books, and it all sounds great on paper. And yet somehow it's not translating to our personal life. And this is why I had an incredible conversation with Julian Hayes II. Julian gets it. And you'll start to sense that from the very beginning. He is somebody who understands your health on multiple levels and understands that you live a very dynamic, complex entrepreneurial life. And so in today's episode, Julian breaks it down in a way where taking care of you, taking care of your health becomes clearly actionable. So I want you to let go of all of the fear and resentment and regret that you have when it comes to your health. Hop into today's episode. Julian will inspire you. Let's hop into the show. Hey friend, welcome back to the show. I'm Katie Richardson. This is What's Working Now. Today we're going to talk about how can you be hyper efficient. As entrepreneurs, we're looking for what's that thing when I focus on that or I invest in that, I get a greater output. And I discovered this on my own entrepreneurial journey, thankfully, early on. And this is why I have Julian Hayes II on the show today. Julian's an author. He's a hybrid athlete. He's the founder of Executive Health Coach. He's going to show you how to run your body like a business and how to treat your health like a Fortune 500 company. What are some of the things that we talk about? We talk about unexpected ways that you can differentiate yourself. He's going to dive into epigenetics. And this is something that I discovered about 10 years ago that helped me make changes that I thought were impossible for myself. And when you understand this science, making those changes becomes obvious and almost a natural outcome. He's going to show you how to do that and how everything in your environment and community is impacting you on the cellular level. We're going to discuss what to do when you have uncontrolled stress. We're going to talk about strength training versus cardio. We're going to talk about your daily routine. We talk about so much. Julian is a man who has a unique perspective. So let's dive into the conversation right now. I really feel like somebody like you has a really unique perspective. And I'm really curious about where that perspective started. So tell us the story of an experience that's radically formed and shaped how you view the world today.
Yeah, I think it's my inner rebel, and I think I have an alter ego. And so I know Kobe Bryant, a lot of people had an alter ego, and I don't really talk about it that much. But for me, there were certain things I wanted in life, and just the one Julian is not strong enough for that. He needed a little more of a fighter. So then I became the silent assassin. So that guy's still pretty quiet, but he's deadly. And that's what I remind myself a lot of times. And the reason why I said that is because growing up, when I think about health, you know, I was told that when you get to 30 and beyond, that it goes downhill from there. And my initial environment was kind of supporting that. That's all I saw around me was just people started to decline after that. You know, my father dealt with a bunch of illnesses throughout his life. He's a fighter. Grandfather, aunts, you've seen dialysis. So you've seen a lot of this stuff. Even you had a doctor one time that said that there's a high likelihood you're going to be diabetic. I was like, well, that's interesting. And yeah. Wow. And so I think they think they're doing your job to prepare you. But so I'm better these days at forgiving people and not. So that's the thing I had to work on. So, and the thing was, I played basketball and we're playing down the court. There's this older gentleman who's running with us, and we're like I'm like 17 at this time. And that was fascinating. And so I was like, who is this guy? Is he from Earth? Because this is leading to some serious cognitive dissonance right now.
Yeah.
So I get to talk to this guy, and I asked him, what's your secret, man? Like, you're running better than most of these 17-year-olds. And he goes into a spiel and he talks about wellness, but it's a very holistic manner and it's very basic advice. So as a 17-year-old, you're like, well, that's basic. Okay, sure. Whatnot. But as I go to college and I actually start to take care of my health more and start to work out, learn about nutrition through other people, I think what that man did, he planted a seed in me. He planted a seed. He didn't know when it was going to sprout or even if it was going to sprout, but he at least planted a seed. And so kind of my life philosophy now is for people and even myself is that just finding a way to get exposure to something, exposure to a new world, exposure to something that you really desire and want. Then you can see it clearly in your mind. And that's how it all starts.
Wow. I love hearing this moment of where your natural curiosity was like, hey, something's different about this man. And maybe you couldn't even articulate it at the time, but you could feel that cognitive dissonance and it caused you to speak up and ask questions. But it sounds like you were in this open place where like, teach me, tell me more. You're doing something different. And like you said, I think it's important to notice that he planted a seed in you, and maybe it didn't radically transform your life at 17, but eventually the fact that you took notice and you were open enough to be asking those questions and kind of continually seeking, it kind of led you in a lot of these directions, like to ultimately, I would say, where you are now, which is this incredible executive coach who really helps somebody perform at a very high level. Treat your company like a Fortune 500 treat your body like a Fortune 500 company. Like, this is a really radical perspective, and it's really cool to hear what led you in that direction. So, what you do, I think hearing this perspective helps me see that you do have a totally different approach. What are some key fundamentals of your process that make your process different and therefore very effective?
Well, I think that the first thing is to realize that I'm not the be all expert and to really know what you're strong at. And so when I stumbled upon this idea, and when I left medical school after that first year, I started just personal training. And I was okay at personal training, but I had a friend who's really good at personal training. And so that, once again, that makes me realize that that's not my best skill set. We're getting results, but different ways. And I'm much more interested in the whole big picture instead of just really focusing on different exercise, very specific exercise programming. So that's one thing that I'm not the best at. So what's my lane going to be? I kept searching for this lane. And as health and fitness continually grows and evolves, how can you actually differentiate yourself and not be a commodity? So that was the thing as well, because I was working way too hard to try to differentiate myself to even, why would this person pay this compared to this person if you're all just a trainer? So how do you differentiate yourself? So that was one thing. And but then going back to my story in my childhood, I've always been curious of why certain segments of certain families have a predisposition to have certain illnesses just run through their family, and then other things don't, and then the other one does. So that led me down. I just started studying again. That's, if there's anything I can do, I can read and study. I've been trained. I had a little too much school, but that's a whole nother story of why I actually had to learn how to break that. But so when you're doing that, I found someone who was very knowledgeable in genetics and epigenetics. So I just reach out. Once again, that curiosity shows up. Then this leads to another thing, and then it leads to another thing. And I started on myself. And I realized, well, I think this is pretty interesting. I think people who are maybe think like me and everything will find this useful. And so I go to a dinner and I just started talking. I was like, well, I don't know. I pretty much treat myself like I'm the CEO of my health. And they're like, oh, that's it. You should change your company name to Executive Health, and then have the IO, since it's more of a techie thing. I was like, sure. Because I had a previous name. It sounded good to me, and that's all I cared about. But if I told you the name, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's cool. What does that do? Whereas now this is a lot easier. So I had to actually learn how to be an actual entrepreneur and business person, and not just fancy myself as an artist and being super creative. So, so we leave there. So I combine all those things. So everything's a hodgepodge, and I look at different industries and I bring it into my specific industry. And then I just ask the question of, what if? I don't like how people think about aging. There's a lot of things I don't like in the world. And so I want to attempt and do my best to solve those things. So that's really how this stuff always starts.
Julian, I see this theme quite a bit when I meet individuals like you who have this really cool, unique perspective, and yet they don't have to go demand people pay attention to them. You have this calm coolness about you. And a lot of times these individuals, they have interest and expertise in multiple areas. And somehow it's the intersection of those expertise that creates this really cool perspective. And there's so many things that you said just in the last little bit, like the artist and the creative, which as a product designer, that's how I got started, was product design. Like I'm super curious about that. But before I dive into that, there's a couple of things I want to ask you. You kind of glossed over this. You said you left medical school after a year. I can only imagine that, telling your parents, your family, I'm going to medical school and making a plan, going to a year of that, and then making the decision to leave. I want to know more about that, because I think we can see now that it led you to where you are, which is an incredible spot. But at the time, that had to have been really difficult to make that decision. And sometimes we can be so disciplined to see things out when actually maybe the best thing is to go to just 1 year and then move on. Tell me more about that time in your life and how you made that decision.
Well, I will say my approval rating, if I was the president or any politician, it was never higher than when I was in medical school, and it's never recovered.
Wow.
Not yet. So
wow.
it's a great feeling, because I'm first generation. So imagine that just getting a bachelor's is great already, but then it's even more icing on the cake when you get to go to medical school, right? Because people love titles. People love titles, and there's this prestigeness with having initials behind your name or before your name, actually. And so I go there and everyone's proud and everything. But when I'm there, once again, like the fitness example, I'm in New York and I am a late bloomer. So my curiosity is not necessarily on the actual subject matter of being a physician. I only wanted to be one thing. That was a eye surgeon. And everything I'm thinking about as I'm learning is, how can I apply this to human performance and human optimization? So that's probably one red signal. But then I go out to this place in the Lower East Side. I still remember it's called the Yucca Bar. And there's a woman there. I leave class a lot because a lot of it's online. I can 2 and 3 exit and save time and go have fun in the city.
Yeah.
So I'm talking to this woman, and the energy that she feels as she's describing her life and her work and how they're so integrated and so in alignment, it made me just enamored and a little bit jealous of, like, wow, I want that, because schools was easy for me. It's a safe route. It was going to be a predictable income in life for me. That's the main thing. I'm not sure I had energy and passion for it. It's just something I did because it's cool, it's interesting, but I didn't really love it. And so I get to an exam, like a 3-hour anatomy exam, and like an hour into it, I'm that guy. I'm shaking up my protein shake, and I look and I just realized, I was like, man, this is not it. Wow. I don't know what I'm going to do. But I talked to a few other doctors. They said it's probably a good decision. Most of the things you want to do, you can do outside of it without a lot of red tape and things like that. So that helped. But then I also thought about 20, 30 years down the line, I don't want to be one of those people who give all these stories of regret. I wish I did this. I wish I took care of myself better. And I didn't want to be those people. They're too bitter. I've met a few of those people, and it's just not good energy. So I thought my decisions was easy to say I'm not going. The hard part was dealing with people who said, oh, you should have stayed, and pretty much it's like a spiritual concept that I'm learning of, like, ignoring. I may not explain it correctly, but ignoring this physical world right now as it is, and really focusing on what you're creating. And so that was the thing that I really, and I still have to work on that, but that was one of the big shifts for me, was to just kind of ignore, because most people are only looking for this week or next month. They're not thinking 5, 15, 20 years down the line. So this has been a 15, 20 year plan from the start initially anyway. So it's really just starting. I'm an adolescent in my view. So but the hard part, just to sum this up, the hard part was dealing with the people afterward, when you're out of school, you're just working at a box gym, you're doing a call center job as well. And then people are like, well, you left medical school to go work minimum wage at a call center in a gym. And you're like, yeah. But I got a vision. I got a vision for when I'm not even 40 yet, but I got a vision for when I turn 45, when I turn 50, right? This is part of the long plan.
Yeah. I love hearing this story. And I think whether or not it's medical school or in a business that you created, and realizing it's time to get out of that vehicle, and maybe that vehicle helped you have clarity of what you want to do in the next season. And I love hearing you talk about your long-term vision, and initially you thought medical school was going to get there. and realizing a year into it, actually, this isn't the vehicle that gets me there, and having the courage to acknowledge that, even though everybody around you was going to be upset and everyone was going to hold it against you for some time. It's really cool to hear the courage, the clarity that you had on your own vision. And I think that's something that every entrepreneur can resonate with. You have brought something up several times, and that is the term epigenetics. And I won't go into detail, but I had an experience where I learned just a little bit about epigenetics, and it radically transformed my actions in a really profound way. But I would love to hear from you. Explain to our audience, what is epigenetics and how does it even relate to a CEO or an entrepreneur who's building something significant?
Yeah, so the scientific term, which is probably the least interesting one, is when you hear the word epi, it means above, and then genetics is obviously the gene. So this is above the gene. So your actual gene is not going to be changed. The genes we have are the genes we have. The cool thing, though, is how it expresses itself. That is what can be changed, and that's under our control. So you think about the hardware and software of a computer, and that software that you put into that hardware, the quality of that, the type, is going to give it the communication and the information of how to process and go about itself. And so that's the same thing here. So in a day-to-day sense, how we interact with our environment is communicating and programming our genes to turn on, to turn off, to express and repress. So we have things like nutrition, and how we eat plays a big role in certain genes expressing themselves and not. How we exercise, how we love, our fulfillment in life, our mindset. It's a very dynamic relationship going on with our environment. You know, the air quality, it's every little thing you can think about is communicating with our body on a cellular level. And so when you think about this big picture, it's, for an entrepreneur, a big one is stress. How do you handle stress? That's a big one. So it's never to get rid of stress, because stress is a good thing, but it's how to mitigate and manage that stress. That's a big one in terms of our genes, because I think uncontrolled stress is probably one of the top things that can make us age much more rapidly. And you can start measuring that. That's a whole other test to measure aging, but stress is a huge one, especially for the world we live in. And the good thing about epigenetics, for me, what it did was it gave me back my personal power, gave me back my control to realize, okay, I do have genes that gives me a high propensity for certain cardiovascular issues and certain blood sugar issues. But the key word there is propensity. It's not my destiny. Yes. And so genes, when you think of genes, it's our past of where we are, of where we came from. But the epigenetics is the future, and that's what we can mold. And so that for me was to let me know that fate is in my hands completely. A little bit is genetic, but mostly there's much more control that we have over the situation. And so that's kind of that in a nutshell. And so for the CEO and the entrepreneur, when you're thinking about this, besides the health standpoint, it's how do I go about my business in a way that's going to be in alignment with my particular set of genes and DNA.
So good. So good. And, you know, as a creator, which ultimately is what I would consider any entrepreneur to be, right? You're creating a future vision that doesn't currently exist. And so as that creator, once you realize that you actually have way more power and influence and control over your own personal health than you previously realized, it moves you from that place of being a victim and just kind of believing that you are the victim of your genetics and this is going to happen to me regardless, to realizing you're in the driver's seat. And that's what an entrepreneur wants more than anything, right? We want to have greater influence. And when you can realize you have even greater influence over your own personal health and your own fitness and your own energy, and you're not a victim to those genetics, it just, I know it lights people up. And I had a similar experience with epigenetics when I started to realize that. And I think when anybody can have that kind of epiphany that you have way more power, way more influence than you realize, it's a huge moment. So, and
I would also add one more thing to that. You know how we're talking about control of your health, and you know, for entrepreneurs, we like a sense of control. Whether we, you know, it's a little bit of an illusion that we don't control everything, but we do like that sense of control. And so you can relate those two things, that no matter what the market is, no matter what some of the doom and gloom news is, we actually have more control over the situation still. Now, it may be a little more difficult, but you know, there's a way around it. There's a way for everything. It's kind of one of the mottos that I use when I'm outside running and everything. And so I think, and that's why like I always just look at health and business the same. And it's helped me for business since I came from the opposite end. I got really good with health and fitness, but knew very little about the business end.
Okay. Interesting. So we could go so many different directions from here. Given everything that we've discussed and talked about, and, you know, talking to this individual who has a very dynamic life as an entrepreneur, you've got a team, you have a spouse and kids, you've got your own personal health, you have your own personal life goals and objectives. You're trying to utilize your vehicle as your business as a vehicle to help you get there. And there's so many different factors, so many different things going on. I can only imagine the daily routines that could potentially support you in going to do those kinds of things. What are some like non-negotiable, basic things that an entrepreneur should be doing? I shouldn't even call them basic because I've experienced it. Like they're very profound. What are some like non-negotiable things that somebody can do as a CEO to have the health that'll support them in building that business and life?
I think the very first thing is to kind of change the way that you even view health and fitness and energy a lot of times. Unfortunately, a lot of times pain is our greatest teacher. And so we need to wait for an event to happen before we shift into action for that thing. And the ironic thing is we would never allow our business to do that. We would never allow our company to do that. We would never allow the people around us to just suffer and decline and then start to try to take action and play catch up. We would never do that. So first thing is to view your body as an asset, as your most powerful asset, your most expensive asset. The stock is only going up with this asset. It's definitely not going down ever. So that's the very first thing. So prioritize self-investment. You know, as I said, your body is an asset. When you think about a business, you think of R&D, you think of people, and the same thing here with your health. And there's a lot of cool tools, but I love to think about structuring your day that's ideal for you, and specifically you in your work. Yeah. So let's say that the first thing I do is, when can you exercise? Some people it's the morning. Some people, they like to break it up in the middle of the day as a halftime, or some people like to end the day as a capstone with it. And so that's the first thing I look at. So let's identify that, and then let's go ahead and get that on the calendar.
Which I love. Like, can we just take a second to acknowledge that? I think there's so many books and just like accepted views that you have to work out in the morning. And you're saying, guess what? That's not everybody's circadian rhythm. That's not necessarily the best time for everybody. And giving yourself permission to work out in the middle of the day or work out in the evening. Beautiful. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I've seen so many crazy scenarios and stuff. So like, it doesn't make sense to say everybody needs to be part of the 5 a.m. club. There's no absolutes in everything. Yeah. I'm not running at 5. I'm not running at 5 a.m. It's just not happening. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. And unless it's like some type of event or something, that's not going to happen. Now, I'm also not saying you should work out at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night as well. But you can be fluid with that situation and what suits you best. Because we have different lifestyles. We're in different phases of life with our families and businesses and that kind of thing. So the next thing is, I like to think about nutrition. And with nutrition, it's a little bit of the same way of kind of what's your standard of performance. And standard of performance is a term that I learned about for the football fans out there, from Bill Walsh. He's coached the 49ers. The 49ers were absolutely terrible in the late 70s. So he gets in there. Within 2 years, they win their first Super Bowl. But the cool thing about it is he went in there and he established a bunch of standards, like the name, processes. So players had their jerseys tucked in. You did drills a certain way. There was a certain language requirement, and all these little things that added up to the result. And so bring that back to nutrition. What is your process for nutrition? So why are you going to eat? Where, when, and how are you going to eat? You can ask yourself these questions. It's a little more thinking, but I promise you, it puts things on autopilot then. Because a lot of times when we think about nutrition and food, we think about, I'm just going to follow this diet and that's it. And you just go from there. And you don't think about some of the other things that goes along with it. Besides, is this even ideal for my genetics? But is this even ideal for my lifestyle? Do I even enjoy this thing? because we're looking for sustainability. We're looking for health and business to symbiotically marry each other and merge. We don't want them to butt heads that, I got to do this health thing, so it's causing friction with my other life. And so typically, breakfast is good for entrepreneurs and CEOs. Dinner's pretty good sometimes. The tricky thing is throughout the day. That's the thing that takes a lot of focus, because sometimes you get to working, you get to having meetings sometimes that go longer than expected. Something unexpected comes up. And the next thing you know, you just wiped through the entire day without eating, maybe a little dehydrated as well.
Yeah.
Your brain chemistry is off. And so you're going to grab something that's convenient. The world we live in, things that are convenient typically are not best for us. And so now you're probably grabbing something junk food, something that's not ideal. So one thing I like to do is really focus on that portion of the workday. So what works for a lot of people is to just opt for a meal delivery service or something like that. Even if you don't use all your meals that way, just at least have your lunch prepared that way. Or know, what am I going to eat at lunch? And don't leave it up to chance.
Quick question for you. What would happen in your business and life if you could show up powerfully? As a coach to high-performing entrepreneurs, I help intelligent people like you do just that. And if you want to be inspired by people who are getting more done in 90 days than most people do all year, I'm going to invite you to go check out my case studies. The website is now.katierichardson.com/case study. And the cool thing is we've got so many case studies there. You can find an entrepreneur who's just like you. I've also got a link for you down in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. Julian, you've mentioned a couple times how a lot of this is going to depend on your own personal health, your own personal genetics. Are there any sorts of tests that we can take to help us understand the optimal food for myself specifically?
Yeah, usually a basic a genetic test is a good start, because there's certain genes that kind of give you more of a propensity to eat toward a certain way. So for example, for myself, I eat a lower, not to get too technical, let me know if it's too technical. So for me, I don't eat as much saturated fat. I eat way more monounsaturated fat. So things like olive oil, things like macadamia nut oil, avocado oil. I'm more prone to inflammation, and then add on all the exercising I do. So my omega-3s are much, much higher, probably compared to someone else, along with some other supplements as well. And I include nutrition and supplement vitamins together. So for me, vitamin D is a thing that I do not get from the sun as well as others. I don't absorb it. So that's an area. And like protein, there's different levels of protein that someone could do. Some people respond really well to a higher protein diet. Some people more to a moderate and lower protein. Same thing with carbohydrates as you're losing weight. Some people can still eat a decent amount of carbs and still lose weight, whereas others probably have to dial that back a little bit and include more some dietary fats. But that's a good part. But the thing is, I like to always have, because none of these are absolutes, I like to include some lab work as well to go along with that. You know, for my example earlier, I said that I have a higher likelihood for blood sugar issues and that kind of thing. Well, I can go do a lab test and see how my glucose and insulin's looking, and see if is this thing expressing, or this is just a thing that if I don't take care of my lifestyle, this is the first thing that's probably going to cascade and show itself, which is the case. So that's why I like to combine those two things to just get a check under the hood, some basic blood work, and then go from there. Okay.
And to do basic blood work, like I know there's labs in every city where you can go and actually have the work done, but I believe you're also working with a doctor or even somebody like you who's going to interpret those numbers, correct? You kind of need them both.
Yeah. So there's so many different options, and it's the level of detail that you want. So you could probably go to your primary physician and get a basic workup just to get started.
Right. And I'm going to add a primary physician who's not at the level of health that you're seeking to get at. So pay attention to that.
Yeah. Well, this is me being nice. And because some people, you can get super, super detailed in it. And so it's kind of like a ramp up curve, right? So you're not going from 0 to 100, at least a lot of people. I like to do that, and so I'm giving different stages. So you could go to just a regular family physician and get a basic blood work. The only problem most likely is the insurance issue. it'll cover it. Insurance will cover it, but you're not going to get the complete thing because you're probably not going to be showing for a lot of the things that you're asking for.
Yeah.
That's the hang up there.
Can we just speak to that though? Like, so what if your insurance isn't covered on it? Like, this is the one body that you have for the rest of your life. Is it worth a couple $100, $1,000, a couple thousand? Like, is it worth taking some time to establish baseline where you're currently at and how you can I just say that because I've lived outside the traditional insurance, health insurance world for so many years. And it's so freeing when you just give yourself permission to pay out of pocket for things.
It's better. And I will say that a lot of the doctors that I know now, a lot of the better ones are moving to this model now of just being out because it's freeing, like you said, and the level of care, you can provide so much better care. You can provide loads and loads of better care to them because you can spend more time with them. You actually get to learn about them. That's a key part, is developing the relationship. But to quickly answer, to finish that, is there's services you can order now that you can do that. Or, I mean, there's people like me where I'm kind of a hybrid. So I have access for most states to just order and you get it taken care of. And then depending on the level of detail, I have medical partnerships where they would do that. So, because especially for women, women's hormones are completely different than men. It's a whole different ball game. And depending on the age, that's a whole nother story as well. So I know what I don't know. I know just enough of a lot of things to be dangerous, but then I know what I really excel at.
Yeah, which goes back to where you started, like know your lane and know what you're really good at, what your expertise in.
Yeah, and that's why it's a team aspect. So it's never just me. It's the idea of a performance team. If you think about a LeBron James or any other top athlete, they have an entire performance team that's taking care of them, that's allowing them to optimally perform at this high level day in and day out.
Yeah. So I know you're really good at specifically prescribing for each individual, but speak to me, let's zoom out for a second and speak to me about cardio versus strength training. What are the benefits of each and how could we optimally be doing, should we be doing both, and how can we optimize those?
Yes, absolutely. Both are critical for different reasons. When I first started, I was probably more of a meathead, and I just cared about muscles and it just looks, just to be honest. Yeah. And
I have 3 teenage sons, by the way, and that is them. They eat so much protein. They work out for 2 hours a day. It's all muscles. They did a cardio workout with me the other day and they're like, Mom, I'm out of shape, even though they look incredible. Yeah. So that's.
But it's kind of the same thing with me. I had a conversation with a doctor who's really into this longevity space, and in particular cardio, zone 2 cardio is really, really beneficial for us in terms of longevity.
Zone 2 cardio?
So zone 2, so you have 5 zones, and zone 2 is pretty much steady state cardio. It's cardio that's not too difficult and not too easy. So you can have a decent conversation while you're doing it.
Okay.
And I forgot that you could calculate it. You can take probably, I think it's for most people, you probably take 220 minus your age and then do 65 to 70% of that. That's a rough estimate of what your zone 2 range is going to be, but it's a range. But so doing a lot of that is really beneficial because what you're doing is you're improving your VO2 max. And you might hear VO2 max and think, oh, I'm not an athlete. I'm not going for trials or anything, but it's actually important for all of us. And there's a huge study on it, and I forgot the study, but the benefits of just having a great VO2. So having it, I like to aim for like a decade younger. So I'm 37 now. So I like to have a VO2 max of maybe like a 25, 27-year-old. I would aim for that. So have it at least a decade younger. If you're really greedy, maybe 2 decades. And
how can you test VO2 max, by the way? Do you have to do the running test with the mask?
Yeah, they have one of those. Yeah. I mean, there's other services that you can do other ways, but that's going to be the most accurate. Okay. And so, but if you just want to get a working thing just to get going, that's fine. But that's the best one is to do that. And so, so you'll have that. And then when it comes to high intensity training, is great as well. That's more zone 4, zone 5 as well. So that's good as well.
Okay.
And after I get done explaining, I'll give like a sample schedule. And muscle is a great longevity currency. It's probably, I think it's the best longevity currency actually. And
like, tell us all the things that it impacts, because I've significantly increased my strength training in the last year, and I've noticed so many benefits. So I think it makes sense to highlight some of those.
On a practical level, as we get older chronologically, we might fall and we're not as resilient. This whole thing about training, it really comes down to resiliency. A lot of times if you see an older individual, if they fall and break a hip or something at a certain age, they're probably not coming back from that, unfortunately. That's it for them. So just from building bone strength alone, muscle strength training is important. And especially for women starting after 30, they're going to lose it at double the rate that men will, unless you do something about it. Unless you do something about it. So that's why I think, looking into a bone density scan at some point, maybe annually, is a good thing, just to see where you stand. Not even just from a body fat standpoint and how much fat is around your organ, but to get an idea of your bone mass. And then that goes.
Is that reversible, by the way? Like if you start losing it and then you start strength training, can you gain some back, or is that you just are preventing bone loss from there on out?
No, you can build.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You can build.
Cool.
I've seen people do that, and then I don't work it necessarily with. I haven't really worked with a population that's been severely deficient in that category, but I have seen it though, right? I have seen it. Cool. And once again, that goes back to adequate amounts of protein to help facilitate that. So all these things are connected. But so we talked about resiliency, we talked about falling, and we talked about our bone mass. One thing from a business standpoint is I think about executive presence and how, when we train, how that does to our posture.
Yeah.
And also the way that it communicates. And so a lot of communication is 93, 94% nonverbal. So a lot of times when you see someone, I think they had studies on this, when you see someone who looks pretty fit and everything, you start to form a story about this person before they even open their mouth. You start to convey that this person is a person that's disciplined. He knows how to delay gratification. He's consistent. Those are great leadership qualities. Those are great qualities for an entrepreneur, especially to have. And it's another great thing when we exercise. There's a lot of times that we can't control things in our business, especially if in the earlier stages, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. And at least for me, that's what it feels like. And I can always control what I put in my mouth. I can always control to go move my body. So this gives me an area of control for that. And how we handle carbohydrates, muscle's going to help with that. So for me, I'm 5'11", 200 pounds. So, and then I work out a lot and have a decent amount of muscle on me. So I'm going to be able to store a lot more glucose from the carbs I eat compared to someone else. So it's not going to spill over. So think about this. My gas tank is bigger compared to maybe someone who's 150 pounds and maybe they don't have as much muscle on them. So the carbs they eat, it's going to spill over quicker. And then that's usually where you get to the weight gain and then other issues like that. And so I'm not going to say that you get privileged that you can just eat what you want, but you do get to eat more than the other person because you're active, your metabolism's going. And then you think about thyroids, you think about people that, I'm doing all the things right. I'm not eating a lot now. And I'm just working out. And I'm still not losing weight. I'm actually gaining weight. Well, that's where the people are not just strength training. They're just doing cardio. So these things need a balance. And so to tie this all up, generally, I would say at least strength train at least 3 days a week as a minimum. And I'd like to do zone 2 or just total cardio, let's say maybe 1 day of high intensity. So one session. So you can do that high intensity session after one of your workouts.
Okay.
So that could be jump roping, rowing, anything that really gets your heart rate up. And then the other days you can do some zone 2. So whether that's a swim, that's a run, it's a bike, or you can hike. And if you ruck, you could put something on your back.
Okay.
That's going to make it a little more difficult as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of the wearables that we have, they will give you an indication of where your heart rate and everything falls, and you can go by that.
Okay.
They're not completely accurate, but they are good. I like them. And so I would go with that. And then, so now the way we establish it is you have every day, there's some type of activity, because I do believe that you should be doing some type of activity every day. You don't have to go to the gym every day, but there's something just to get your body moving, just cognitively, and even for your feelings and your mindset. You just feel so much better as you're moving. And so when you're looking at a problem in your business, or you're trying to figure out an issue, some of my best ideas have come from when I'm running and when I'm just out on a track, not thinking about work, and then bam, it pops up to me.
I've had some of my most incredible moments of inspiration, and I would even say like spiritual experiences associated with exercise and pushing my body physically. And there's something that happens in your mind. There's so much clarity. I mean, this morning after my workout, I had so much clarity on this thing that I'm trying to figure out. And I just sat down on the workbench and I just started typing it all out, because it was just like all there all of a sudden. And it came right on the heels of a strength training workout. And another benefit that I've noticed from adding not just strength training, like I've lifted weights since I was a kid as a young gymnast. And lately I've had injuries, which makes me hesitant to increase weight load in workouts. And so for a long time I was lifting weights, but not increasing.
You're doing those light weights.
Oh yeah. For years and years and years. And recently I started working with somebody, and they were just, I don't know what it was, but I just had the confidence to increase the weight. And the opposite of what I was afraid was going to happen is what happened. Like, not only did I not injure myself, but a lot of the pain from past injuries that I have started to go away. And I don't know if that's associated with the inflammation. I mean, you were talking about you had a genetic propensity for inflammation, but like a lot of my inflammation started going away because of strength training. And I feel like specifically deadlifts. I don't know what it is about a deadlift, Julian, but I'm like, this is my friend. And are there other strength training workouts like a deadlift that maybe people aren't thinking about? And it's like, really think about this one.
I love deadlifts. It's my favorite. It's my favorite exercise.
Really?
There's so many different variations. You know, you have the standard deadlift, you have the Romanian deadlift, you have a trap bar deadlift. Those are kind of my three. They're a little different in what they work. For most people, probably the Romanian deadlift is good. It's easier compared to the conventional in terms of injury risk and all that. But I like the overall conventional deadlift. But I think being able to squat, if you think about the movement patterns that we do throughout our day, I think being able to mimic those things with weights, and it just goes hand in hand. So we hinge every day. That's what a deadlift is. We squat in some form every day. So maybe we should work on a squat. And when you think about squatting, also think about your progression. So even if your form's not good right now, start with a body weight. Then you can go to a kettlebell. Then you can go to a dumbbell. Then you can go to a barbell. So you don't immediately have to use a barbell if you feel nervous about something. Kettlebells are fantastic. Fantastic. I have a friend who that's his main thing is to use kettlebells. For his stuff. So kettlebells are great. Then you think about some type of pulling motion. So whether it's a pull-up, whether it's if you can't do a full pull-up yet, I think there's assisted pull-up machines that can help. There's lat pull downs. Yeah, there's bands, there's lat pull downs. So think about pushing, pulling, squatting, and then hinging. But for most of us now that do with the computer now, do more pulling, because if you look at most people's posture, they're going to, I don't know if people can see this, so they're going to be, as they're sitting, they're rotating in. So they're not open, but they're in. So therefore, those people especially need to do more pulling. So if I see a person with a posture like that, I would probably have, for every push exercise.
Pulling like rowing?
Yeah. Pulling's like a rowing, a lat pull down, pull-ups, anything to work your back and not just it's forward motion, because you are too internally rotated. And think about when you do that, someone has open posture, once again, this goes back to improving the executive presence and how you show up to people. Because someone that's open like this is going to be received energetically much different than someone who's closed off like this.
Yeah.
And we would never know that. And that's that nonverbal communication that we talk about.
Yeah. And just like, you know, so many things that we've talked about that are ever present in the life of a CEO, right? The high level of stress, the fact that your life is very dynamic and there's all these parts and pieces. For some reason, Julian, that 45, an hour and a half minutes a day of fitness and exercise and pushing yourself physically, it has so many of these elements just kind of falling into place. And it's like this domino that when you knock that domino over every day, all these other things start to line up and you have more energy, you have more focus, you have greater clarity. And it's a decision that we make ahead of time. It's like, listen, I'm committed to this. I'm building a life. I'm not just going to keep putting my head down and sacrificing my health and fitness for the hope of a big payoff one day, which we've all been there. We've all done that. And at some point you're like, that's not sustainable. And so I want to remind everybody that that's why we're going into the details of all of this, because it impacts so many, like it impacts your personal relationships.
It does. And when you think about it, though, you have someone that, if they just keep their head down, wanting the big payoff.
Yeah.
They say they get to that and say it took maybe 10 years and they neglected their health for a decade. So they get that big payoff. And probably what they're going to realize and actually experience sooner than later is that I'm going to have to use a lot of money from that big payoff to try to get back my health.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to pay the bill in some way. And I think the bill is much cheaper when you just do it now and you do it in small increments than waiting to the end and you're having to really try to reverse and regenerate a lot of things. You can do that now. There's some cool things you could do, but from just a lifestyle, a long-term sustainability model, it's just better to do it a little bit every day. And like you said, the energy, that's the resource management. Our energy is a big part. I don't think we mentioned sleep. Sleep is an important thing.
Oh, man.
I think people talk about sleep a lot, but sleep is it's a very important thing especially from a cognitive standpoint. Losing weight, sleep is a big part of that. Hormonal optimization, sleep is a big part of that. So just like I mentioned, to schedule the exercising, to think about your nutrition, and especially the middle of the day, it's the same thing with sleep. The hardest thing is you're just working. And then all of a sudden, it's time to go to sleep. And you just try to go to sleep. If you can give yourself a buffer, at least an hour and a half, maybe, and just to wind yourself down and then go into the process of sleep. That will do wonders for you.
Huge advice. Great advice. Julian, I feel like we're just scratching the surface of everything that I know that you could really help us with and shine a light on. I want to make sure that we discuss the fact that you've got a book. You're an author. So I want to hear a little bit about your book, and then also want to make sure we mention that you've got a podcast as well. So tell us about those different ways that people can go deeper with you.
Yeah, so I wrote that book a handful of years ago, and that was his send off for my old iteration into kind of what I am now, and into getting a little more technical and advanced with my health and fitness. But that book was mainly designed as like a fitness origin story. I'm really into comics and stuff as a kid and that thing. Cool. And so I thought about, when I write books, I wanted this one to be just, where do you start? You start here, and it's different stories and how I explain a lot of basic concepts. And it's to choose your own adventure inside that book. So you can, there's a sleep section, an exercise section. And so depending on whatever you need, you can just go to that and get a little very quick advice to implement. And so, so it's a good foundational tool. And then the podcast is Executive Health and Life. Okay, awesome. And where's the best place to find the book? On your website? No, so you can just go to Amazon. Okay. And what's it called? I don't think I caught that. Oh, Body Architect. I forgot to mention it. Yeah. Body Architect. Body Architect. Okay, cool. On Amazon. Yeah. And your podcast is called Executive Coach. Is that right? Executive Health and Life. And the website is Executive Health. Okay, awesome. Before you leave, Julian, and this has been such an amazing conversation, I do have a few rapid fire questions. Okay. What's something that you do consistently every day? Oh man, what is something I do consistently every day? I listen to salsa every day.
You listen to salsa?
Yeah.
Get out. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
It's I when I went salsa dancing some, it's hard to be depressed, it's hard to be sad in that kind of environment. And so it was as part of my therapy. I went to therapy for a little bit, and that was part of
Okay.
my treatment that was given to me because I
Mm,
mentioned it a lot. I love music.
that's
And so
so cool.
I got out of my comfort zone, learned how to do
Mhm.
various Latin dances, and it's such good energy for me and to
That's
set the
really
day.
cool. Yeah, that's really cool. Tell us about a book that maybe significantly impacted you, so much so that you've read it more than once. Maybe you gift it to people. What's that book that's really impacted you?
Yeah, I love Patrick Lencioni's books, and in particular, Getting Naked. And that
I
one's
am not
about
familiar.
it's about working. It's about client loyalty and what clients really want. In
Mm,
particular, the big thing for me was when you're working with people, sometimes you might feel like an imposter. If you work with someone that's wealthier than you, maybe has much more of a higher title than you, and so they have
okay.
all this prestige compared to them. And so,
Hmm.
but that's not the main thing. And when you're working with them, you don't want to look dumb or something. And so
Sure.
it's really shedding all those fears
Okay.
about working with clients and working with people things.
That's
And
really
so,
cool.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm actually reading it again. I'm in the middle of it now, just
I
as a
love it.
reminder of what is really vulnerability. What is that
Yeah.
word? Because we say that a lot. And so
Sure.
not being afraid to say, I don't know, let me go check, let me go
Yeah.
find out, and I'll get back to you, things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe there's been a critical inflection point in your life where somebody gave you some advice that really helped you move past that difficult moment. Can you share that advice with us?
Yeah, I don't want to cheat. And so we already talked about New York and the stuff from childhood. So another one is I have a friend who raps sometimes. And there was a line he said, do it for the intention, not the attention. And
Ooh.
that's been a big career thing for me. So when I go to creating, when I things for social, things for podcasting, or things for business, it's not really about what's going to get attention, what I think is popular, what I think. It's more about what is in alignment with the actual mission and sticking with
Oh,
that
good.
intentionality.
So good. Yeah. Julian, answer this one last question for me. What's working now? I mean, you are a man who not only has incredible systems and processes to help an executive optimize their health, but you're also building a business. So when you think about building your business and all of the different ways that you can potentially create interest and intrigue in your products and services, what's working now in your business?
It sounds so basic, probably, and some of the more seasoned entrepreneurs are going to be like, really? For me, honestly, it's actually opening up and getting help, getting a consistent mentor, and having somebody
Mm.
that helped me in the business that is going to complement a lot of my skills, that allows me just to be me. So
Wow.
it's
Love it.
and the funny thing is, so I'm an only child, and then also
Okay.
going through academia, everything is just in your hands. So that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of how, and I can do everything. I can teach myself how to do things. And so I had
Mm-hmm.
to really learn that somebody else can do this better than you. And this person could probably really help you go faster. I know you're
Yeah.
probably decent and good at it, but like, what are you really great at? What do you actually really
Yeah.
enjoy? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's that basic principle right now of just that you don't have to be on your own crusade, and it takes a team.
Yeah. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, we think if this is really going to be my business, I have to do it all by myself. I have to prove
Yeah.
to myself, to my dad, to the world that I can do this on my own. And that's really small thinking. I think it's really wise of you to be like, guess what? Even the greatest, Michael Jordan, had a coach. And why not have somebody who can help me optimize how I'm
Yeah.
operating?
That's been the conversations lately, is learning to separate and not everything so personally or as a personal
Right.
thing. But yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah.
that's why I said I'm an adolescent at this, but it's exciting. Every day's new. Every day is new.
Yeah. Yeah. Julian Hayes II. This has been an incredible conversation. We will have links at the bottom of the show notes for you to go connect with him, find that book, go listen to his podcast. But ultimately, I'm going to make an invitation right here. We talked about a lot of things today, and I'm going to ask, what what's sticking out for you? What's the thing that really is resonating for you specifically? Julian's great at creating custom plans for people, and your opportunity is to look at this conversation and say, what's that custom thing for me right now? And then the second invitation is, how can you take action on that? Maybe it includes reaching out to Julian and his team and establishing the baseline of where you're at in your health and understanding how to create a map for how to optimize that. He's the guy to do that. Julian, this has been an incredible conversation. And for everybody who's listening, this is what's working now.